all the people, those who are here in this evening. And I know that very great people are just going to talk. We are going to discuss. So I just have this honor. So with me, Professor Joy sir is there. Anuradha ma'am already, we know her very well. And today I have the meeting, the webinar that we are going to conduct. It will be chaired by Mr. Anvay Mukhopadhyay sir. And he's our, what I can say, he's is just with us, always supporting us, guiding us, and always motivating us to do something great for the motherland, the language. And today's webinar is going to be chaired by him. So here is a very brief, I welcome you all, and here is a brief introduction of Dr. Anvay sir. May I proceed with that, Anvay sir?
Yes, could we just do a small invocation and then you can take over? So just maybe can I request Vladimir ji to do an invocation for us, please, if you don't mind? We'll request you for the invocation and the Shanti Mantra, if you don't mind.
All right. Om Vang me manasi pratisthita mano me vachi pratishthitam aviravirma edhi vedasya ma'ani stha shrutam me ma prahasihi anena dhitena oratran samdadhami Rutam vadishyami, satyam vadishyami, tanmamavatu, tadvaktaramavatu, avatu mam, avatu vaktaram, avatu vaktaram. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Bahu dhanyavadaha. I now request Mrigendra ji to introduce Dr. Anvay Mukhopadhyay.
Thank you, ma'am. So, a brief introduction to Dr. Anvay Mukhopadhyay. Dr. Anvay Mukhopadhyay is an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Kharagpur, West Bengal, India. Previously, he was an assistant professor at Banaras Hindu University and at the University of Burdwan. He was educated at Jadavpur University, Kolkata, and BHU, Varanasi, where he obtained his PhD and successfully completed the course on Hinduism, ritual, caste, and gender. And it's a course offered by Trinity, Oxford Centre of Hindu Studies, a recognized independent centre of the University of Oxford in August 2016, and was placed in the first class, securing 84% marks. Mukhopadhyay's recent publications include, among others, The Authority of Female Speech in Indian Goddess Traditions, Devi and Woman's Planning, the Goddess in Hindu Tantric Traditions, Devi as Corpse, and literary and cultural readings of Goddess Spirituality, The Red Shadow of the Mother, and after that, he has published 2 books of creative writing as well, fiction and poetry. His critical and creative writings have been published in noted journals in India, Australia, and USA. His works have been cited and discussed by reputed scholars in celebrated international journals published by Sage, Taylor, and Francis Springer and Cambridge University Press. He has presented papers and chaired academic sessions in national and international conferences in and outside India, and has contributed chapters to several edited volumes. His documentary film Saraswati, The Daughter of Saraswati, on women's Sanskritic education in an ashram in Varanasi made with the startup grant awarded by BHU was screened at the Center for Women's Studies, BHU, and is available on YouTube. He is an associate faculty at the Center for Advanced Studies in South Asia, Lalitpur, Nepal. On January 25th, 2020, he was honored with Yuva Ratan Award by NRI Welfare Society of India, New Delhi, at Pravasi Bharatiya Kendra, Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi. Besides, he has received the Bharat Vikas Award conferred by ISR in the year 2019. In addition to several awards for academic and co-curricular performance, including university medals for topping the merit list in BA and MA examinations, his project titled Achieving the Heritage of Hindu Spiritual Congregations in Varanasi along both synchronic and diachronic axis ISIRD project sponsored by SRIC IIT Kharagpur is running at IIT Kharagpur. And here is a small detail of his research output. Major recent publications so far: 3 books, sole author published by noted international publishers like Routledge, London and New York, Palgrave, Macmillan, New York, Springer, Nature Calm, and Cambridge Scholars Publishing, Newcastle, UK. Some edited volumes where he is a co-editor, books of creative writing, poetry and fiction, research papers, book reviews, articles, etc. So I hope it was really big for me and a very challenging job to read this all. But yes, quite interesting, and really it's a prestigious. I've got a chance to just say a few lines about this person, but he holds a lot of potential to cater more things, deliver more things there. So with these words, I just request Anvay sir, you kindly introduce Vlamadi sir to everyone. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrigendraji. It's also my great honor and privilege to have the opportunity of introducing Dr. Vladimir Yatsenkaji here. So I will request him to deliver his speech. But before that, just let me briefly mention his achievements and his areas of specialization. So Dr. Vladimir Yatsenka, MA in Sanskrit Language and Literature, General and Theoretical Linguistics, PhD in Indian Philosophy, has been doing research in the field of Vedic and Vedantic studies, Indian philosophy, philosophy of language, and integral yoga psychology. He was a visiting professor of Sanskrit and integral studies at Oro University, Surat, and a facilitator at the University of Human Unity Project at Oroville, Indian Psychology Institute in Pondicherry, International Center of Integral Studies in New Delhi, and ACCAR in Pondicherry. At present, he is a visiting member at the Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, Fountain Inn, USA. And Dr. Yatsenka will be speaking on the influence of Sanskrit on the emergence of the disciplines of linguistics and several other disciplines of humanities in the 19th and 20th century Europe. And he would also be focusing on the different branches of humanities which were formulated under, as it were, the shadow of the influence of Sanskrit. And this is a very interesting area, because this is something which the Eurocentric epistemologists have more often than not tried to ignore systematically. In fact, I belong to the discipline of English literature, and I know that almost deliberately there is an attempt to erase this history, but this is very important. And as we know, Schopenhauer himself said that, the 19th century onwards, there will be a second renaissance, as it were, and it would be spearheaded by the influence of Sanskrit, just as the earlier Renaissance in 16th century was spearheaded by Greek, the revival of Greek. So this is something which is very important. And even though certain Western scholars, thinkers, philosophers did disagree with certain things in the Sanskrit texts, we need to understand that even disagreement is some kind of engagement. So it's not just agreement which is engagement, but disagreement is also a form of engagement. So when we look at the history of modern European thought, it's very important to trace the influence of Sanskrit. And as we know, this influence often operates in a surreptitious way when we are talking about the domain of thought, human thought. So over to you, Dr. Vladimir Ji. We are really privileged to have you here, and please present your speech.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Of course, I am coming from a bit different background, less academic and more engaged background. I'm more interested in the topic itself and how it changes our life and our psychology and our way of looking at things. So to speak a few words, I will say a few words about myself, that actually I needed Sanskrit for the yogic studies. So I thought that without Sanskrit I cannot proceed, and I cannot really understand much of what Sri Aurobindo was telling us in his books, such as Synthesis of Yoga. All his books are somehow related to Sanskrit studies. Yeah, just look at this. Life Divine is built on the commentaries on Isha Upanishad, the Synthesis of Yoga, it's all Sanskrit literature. Savagery is a story from Mahabharata. Upanishads, what he published is a powerful book. Secret of the Veda, Hymns to the Mystic Fire, Foundations of Indian Culture. Just take any book and you will see that all of them are somehow related to the Indian tradition and literature. And he himself was a poet, a great poet. And prior to Sanskrit studies, he studied Greek and Latin and French and other languages. So he was a unique representative of Indian culture. So he studied his own mother tongue, Bengali, when he arrived already in India, and also Sanskrit. He did studies by himself, which is quite remarkable, because when you see how he interprets the Vedas and the Vedic texts, with which he dealt all his life from the beginning till the end of his days. Already in 1949 we have his records of mentioning the Rig Veda and making interpretation of certain verses in 1949. So, and in 1950 he left his body. He already didn't do any writings, but still he was working on the Vedic texts. There is something about this vision of Sanskrit, which is so unique and so profound, which builds the whole Indian civilization as we know it, starting from the Vedic texts, without which there would be no Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, because they are all somehow commentaries on the Veda, on Samhita. Rig Veda Samhita is the foundation from which everything else follows. And all the Shastras, all the Vedangas, all the Darshanas, just name it, pick up one. They will be referring to the Vedas one way or another. Some of them will be arguing with Brahmanism, saying that it became very ritualistic, like we have in Buddhism, for example. Buddhism was denying Vedism because of Brahmanism, because of ritualism, which became void of the spirit, as Buddha saw. So, but it's quite interesting that all of the literature which followed refers to the Veda. And even Tantra, which is the closest to us, is considered to be the Veda for Kali Yuga, as they call themselves. So in a way, everything relates to this unique and beautiful literature of the hymns, of the most inspired poetry, of the most beautiful poetry, in the most sophisticated language. The language of the Veda is much more developed, as it were, or flexible or rich, than any classical tongue, by the way, any classical literature. And that is, in a way, a puzzle, you know. How come that the Vedic language was so rich and the Vedic content, psychological content, was so profound? It's not just a religion, it's a psychology of universals, where all the universal forces of higher consciousness are being invoked for the transformation of our nature and human beings, and not only human beings, all beings. The invocation is happening to invoke these forces for transformation of the whole earth and the whole cosmos, to make it more suitable for the divine manifestation. That's why Sri Aurobindo refers to the Vedas constantly, and as he says somewhere, the Vedas were our beginning and the Vedas will remain our end. So this is something to think of, because Sri Aurobindo would never say such a thing in vain. He was very precise, very scientific. And he says that we only scratched the surface a little bit. You know? What we know about the Veda and all what he did, such a profound topics he discovered. He gave us keys to how to read the Vedas. His works, the Hymns to the Mystic Fire and the Vedic and Philological, there is a new volume coming up, Vedic and Philological Analysis Studies. The big volume, you can read what Sri Aurobindo did. His Origins of Aryan Speech, Secret of the Veda. Yeah, it's a very rich and profound study. And after all of it, he says we scratched only the surface and we took only the easiest part of this sophisticated system of knowledge. So what is this Sanskrit literature and why it is so important for the world and India especially? Because India is to recover its own origins, you know, its own historical consciousness. That from the beginning of time there was an attempt in India to build up a higher civilization with a higher consciousness, with a divine embodied consciousness. And it proceeded from the Vedic fundamental vision towards, through all the structures of consciousness, starting from the archaic, magic, mythical, towards mental structure, and we have already Sankhya and Yoga, which is much more scientific in its approach, and then finally Tantra, and we move into the modern age. So Sanskrit is like a red thread which connects all structures, all different ways of thinking, being, within one framework, within one language, which embraces all these structures and gives them kind of uninterrupted, unbroken sense of parampara. So we have a connection to the deeper historical consciousness. And it is happening only in India. It's the only civilization whose development was not interrupted from the prehistoric times. So why is that important? It is important because all these structures of consciousness are needed for the integral structure. They will all emerge at the end and will become efficient in building up our psychology. That's what Sri Aurobindo calls that we are entering into the subjective age and into the spiritual age. And the role of India is here fundamental. So that is about literature. But today I wanted to speak about linguistics and India's contribution to the philosophy of language. You know that India is built on the power of the word. In Mahabharata, Patanjali mentions one profound myth of creation of the world, which is where Indra was the first student of Sanskrit, and Brahaspati was the teacher who was teaching Sanskrit to the gods. So all of them came to Brahaspati, sat at his feet, learning from him Sanskrit. So Indra was his first student, and we know that Brahaspati is the Lord of the divine mind, the Lord of the divine word, and Indra is the Lord of the divine mind. So the Lord of the divine mind is learning Sanskrit from the Lord of the divine word. Can you imagine? What can be more significant? So, and Patanjali says Indra understood that even 1,000 years, 1,000 is the figure of speech. It means infinity in the Vedic terminology. Even within infinity, he will not be able to complete his studies. Because there is a reason, and that's quite interesting. And here I'm coming to the etymology. Because every sound or word which Brahaspati was pronouncing, sounding that time, was actual in its power and meaning to that moment of time. So every time he pronounced something, it was real, it was true in that moment of time. So since he comes from the infinity, from the eternity, there is no end to that sound, which would be actual to its own power. So Indra understood that he will never be able to complete those studies because it's infinite. So what he did, he stopped this flow of Brahaspati's speech, cut it into pieces, into grams, as it were, and created grammar. He could capture the sound which was actual, which was charged with meaning by grammatical means, by the mental categories of subject and object, by predicate and by time and space and causality, by the karakas about which I wanted to talk today, karakas and vibhaktis. He separated these sounds, shaped them into varnamala, where all articulations could bring certain significances, certain general meanings, which together combined could build certain categories. So he captured the word by the mental categories, by the mind. Indra is the Lord of the divine mind. He created grammar which now separates heaven and earth, meaning and sound, artha and shabda, as it were. Artha and vak got separated, but they can be united only through grammatical structure. And it's quite interesting because when we listen to each other, if I will speak to you in Russian, for example, you would not be able to understand me. And not because of the words you do not know, but the grammar you can't recognize. You cannot put together the sound which would point you to the meaning. Yeah? And here I'm coming to this idea of Spota theory and Vachya and Vachaka and signified and signifier, which was taken from Indian literature, from Indian studies into the studies of grammar. And Saussure was actually, Saussure was the professor of Sanskrit language, by the way, and his PhD was in Sanskrit grammar. It is not well known. Somehow they don't speak about this anymore. But in those times, he was actually teaching these subjects. And when they wanted to publish his general linguistics, he never published it. It was the notes by the students which was published at the end. He refused to publish it 3 times because he said he's not sure. I think he was quite honest. He didn't want to really speak about these issues as if it was his discovery, because he knew that it was actually taken from the Indian philosophy of language. And that is quite interesting, because this discovery of Vachya and Vachaka, separation of the meaning and sound and their unity in a way, created the whole direction of thinking. That's what's known as structuralism, post-structuralism, phenomenology is joining that party. And we have the whole direction of development in Europe, which was inspired by Indian literature, by Bhartrihari, by Tantra, by Patanjali. Patanjali was first who mentioned Spota theory, by the way. So it is just few references to the development in Europe. And, you know, with the discovery of Sanskrit alphabet, the whole perspective changed, because till that time they had only ABC, Aleph, Bet. Aleph, Bet, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we do not know what it means really. Nobody knows why after A, B, C, D, it all belongs to the system of knowledge which was brought by Moses, and Moses codified his own mysterium, his vision, his occultist vision of the reality in his own way, which is not vocal way, it is not linguistic way of arranging the letters of the alphabet. These letters were the laws of existence, symbols in a way. So he symbolized, with alphabet, he made the symbolic representation of his own system of philosophy or vision of the reality. And in that sense, it was inherited by the Greeks, and then from the Greeks to Latin, and then to all the European languages. So all of them inherited this A, B, C, D, E, F, G without knowing what it really means. And that's why it was always confusing in Europe. There was never linguistic studies or really philology or any deeper knowledge or understanding how we articulate sounds and meanings until Sanskrit was discovered. And once Sanskrit was discovered, kok, ha, gog, hanga, all back tongue, cha, cha, ja, jana, all the palatals, tat, ha, da, da, hana, tat, ha, da, da, na, pa, pa, ba, ba, ma. You have 5 vargas, you have 5 levels of articulation, all possible articulations. This knowledge was stunning for the European scholars. They could never imagine that we could have a systematic view on all sounds, which is so normal for Indians because they grew up with this knowledge. It's kind of inbuilt in their thinking. But it wasn't the case in a European tradition. So once they discovered that systematic articulation of all the sounds, the new topics are coming, and the new disciplines were born. Comparative philology, Indo-European languages, general and theoretical linguistics, all of them come into being with the discovery of Sanskrit. And the first, the father of linguistics, we can call Humboldt, who was actually a very high figure in Germany at that time, so at the beginning of 19th century. Wilhelm Humboldt, I'm meaning, not Alexander. So Wilhelm Humboldt, he spoke, he conversed with his students in Sanskrit. He knew by heart Gita. He learned Gita by heart. We don't know about this because it's something which is not promoted nowadays. Yeah, it's somehow, it's not no more fashionable to speak about Sanskrit influence somehow. And in that way, of course, if you think how much Sanskrit contributed to the development on the whole range of new subjects, humanities, social sciences, I'm even tempted to say that the whole phenomenology is taking a different turn because of that structuralism and view on Vachya and Vachaka, signified and signifier. And we can see it in the Derrida's writings. It's all there already present, Heidegger. So it influenced the European civilization directly from the core, from the very, how to say, deepest conceptual view of our language. Language is the key. Language is how we think. Language is how we use and understand ourselves and the world, how we interact with each other, how we communicate. So linguistics is actually a major subject of all the humanities in a way. Philosophy is built on the usage of language. Psychology even is built on the usage of language. Our understanding is built on the usage of the word. So that Brahaspati's word is still there, and Indra with his structural mind, putting it into perspective, using it and developing it. But now, from now on, once Indra hijacked the Brahaspati's word and put it into his own perspective, separated it, meaning and sound, and now combines them in his own way, from now on, every word, any word, or any sound can be applicable to any context. That means from now on we can lie. Before there was no possible to lie. Brahaspati's word was always true. And now with the application of grammar, you can apply a certain word to certain context where it is not applicable. So what it means, actually, if you look into Sanskrit language, you will see that there are no such words as lie in Sanskrit language. There is only asatyam or anritam. That means not satyam. That means truth is not applicable. Notice, it's beautiful because it means exactly that there is truth. You say the truth, but not for this context, not for this time, not in this space. So it is applicable to some other space or time. So the word is always authentic, always true, always Brahaspati's word, but it is applied in a different context. From here, all the ideas of dharma and adharma. What is adharma? Is a misalignment, misuse, misplacement of truth. If we find the proper place for every true usage, then that is dharma. If we misplace it, it is adharma. So it is not applicable. Okay, that is about the beginnings of thinking of the connection of the word and meaning. And that creates the whole direction of thinking, Spota theory. How the meaning is being revealed in speech, through what means. And there are grades of that, starting from Varna Spota, revelation through the sound, meaning through the sound, till the Vakya Spota, revelation through the text, and Pada Spota in between. So there are disputes, there are discussions, there are different directions of philosophy taking place through these different theories. Very rich environment. And that leads us to the need of etymological theory. And by the way, Sri Aurobindo was nearly the first who connected the meaning and the sound in the psychological way. And I want to maybe read from his quotation, from his what he writes about this. I don't see it now, sorry. I lost it somewhere. Wait a minute, I will find it. Here it is. So Sri Aurobindo says, law and process must have governed the origins and developments of language. Given the necessary clue and sufficient data, they must be discoverable. it seems to me that in the Sanskrit language, the clue can be found. The data lie ready for investigation. We can find an equal regularity, an equal reign of fixed process on the psychological side in the determining of the relation of particular sense to particular sound. And this is fundamental. Particular sense to a particular sound. And from there he started. He started to examine our articulations. He discovered, and it is quite discoverable for all of us, that when we articulate sound, we make a particular effort, which is reflected in our system as a particular state of psychological state. If I make an effort to articulate E sound, or U, or A, E, U, there are three different attempts, three different states of consciousness. With E, I am pressing with the tongue towards the palate. With U, I create some kind of fullness within myself. I feel as if I'm pervading the space within myself. And with A, I do not do anything. So his definitions would be quite interesting. Look at this. Let me read these definitions. The four first simple vowels, A, U, U, and Dri, indicate the idea of being, existence. And why the idea of being existence? Because vowels are infinite. Yeah, they are not like consonants. They are not stops. They are not sprishtas. They are not like ka, ka, ga, ga, which exists only in one touch. But A is infinite. It has no beginning, no end, as it were. So these four indicate the idea of being, existence. A, in its short form, indicates being in its simplicity without any further idea of modification or quality, mere or initial being, creative of space. And it's quite clear because A, no tongue, no lips, nothing is involved. Only vocal cords are sounding the sound. So it's just the idea of simplicity of being, initial being, creative of space. It creates space by vibration, but it is not modified. It is not modulated by any quality. There is no quality in it. It's undifferentiated state of existence. Let us say Sat, the being as such, pure being. E, if you try to modulate it, you will articulate it, you will feel that you have to press the middle of the tongue, to the top of your palate. E is an intense state of existence, being narrowed, forceful, insistent, tending to a goal, seeking to occupy space. So it is like an arrow flying to hit the target. It is the narrowed down, intensive state of existence. It's as if it is paying attention to it, like root chi in the chi chi ji ji ni. This chi root is to gather, to focus, to fix one's consciousness upon one point, one-pointedness. And even in Latin, they write E with like one line and dot on the top. Yeah, because psychologically, it is that intense state of existence being narrowed, tending to occupy the goal, the space. And then U. U is a wide, extended, but not diffused state of existence. It's very charged. It is pervading the space within, being medial and firmly occupant of space. Yeah, and we can see it everywhere where we have Uru. Uru is wide, yeah, where everywhere udaka, water, water, the same etymology in the European. It is something which is firmly as a substance occupying the space. Wide, yeah, vast, all these words you could see. Re is a vibrant state of existence, pulsing in space, being active about a point within a limit. It's like it's drilling, it's crushing, it's breaking, it's constantly that which you find in all other Indo-European languages and in Sanskrit also. So if you analyze the very substance of these simple vowels and then you come to the consonants and combine with the consonants, you will see a very interesting picture that Sanskrit is irregular in the change of sound and meaning. First of all, just open the dictionary, Sanskrit dictionary, and look into the words. Word after word, article after article, the meaning is changing gradually. It's not jumping. So as sound is changing, the meaning is changing. Step by step. So sound and meaning are corresponding in a way. And that makes Sanskrit a unique language. Yeah? And Sanskrit is unique in one more regard, that it does not require any other language to explain its own derivations. It refers to its own system of roots, etymons, simple root sounds, which generated other roots, generated other words, and many, many derivations. And these are simple. The simplest system of etymons is Sanskrit alphabet. Ka, kha, ga, gha, nga. And then I would say chi, chi, ji, ji, ni instead of cha, cha, ja, ja, nya, because E is more natural for palatals. So I will combine it with a palatal vowel, and then pu, pu, bu, bu, mu. So ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, chi, chi, ji, ji, ni, pu, pu, bu, bu, mu. And these would be first simple roots. And if you start analyzing them, you will be surprised that E is moving, constantly moving. Chi is noticing. From here, chit, consciousness as noticing. Chinoti, chinute. And chinoti causing, focusing, piling up. From here, chitti as piling up. And also chitta as noticing, focusing, one-pointedness. Yeah. Then G to conquer, Shi to sharpen. You would feel all these meanings with E, and which is narrowing down, focusing, making it sharp. Yeah. And if you go through all the roots, you will see that everywhere it will play that particular varna, or that particular color, that particular flavor of meaning, of general meaning, will be in all the roots and all the words. You can feel it within the body. You can connect to it in the very meaningful way. And that explains why we have, for example, synonyms in the language, because synonyms is nothing but different roots from different sounds. We are arriving at common meaning, or common meaning in the Indras way. Yeah? If I say big ocean, or immense ocean, or huge ocean, these are all different words. Yeah? Big ocean and huge ocean, poets feel it very different. Poets would never use big ocean where it is not applicable. They would say huge ocean. Why? Because huge has this extension. Somehow we know about it. How do we know that big is heavy, bulky, and has no space, and huge has space and extended? We know it through Brahaspati's speech. Brahaspati's speech is still alive behind our consciousness. It is still being activated by Indra every time we use our language. And that is the contribution of Sanskrit. It's a profound contribution. Connection to the original meanings, to the deeper meaning within ourselves. We can recognize it. It becomes alive in us. And as Sayana would say, those who know Vedic mantras, they bring to birth the gods, because these powers of the divine consciousness are standing behind these vibrations, and they become alive within our being and extend our consciousness. And that is the linguistic approach to Sanskrit. I will stop here, and then we'll invite any discussion. It would be interesting to do, to speak about it more.
Could I just say something there? So thank you very much for always bringing alive the connection between sound and meaning, its effect on our consciousness. And every time we hear you, there is so much to feel in this relation of the origins of language. But could I also request you a little bit, as I had in the thing, to just share with us a little bit of your connection with the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Ramayana. If you just like to take maybe 5-10 minutes to give us a treat on that as well.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. If you take Ramayana, for example, and you will notice an interesting thing. If you read the Ramayana, after one page of reading, all your troubles will be gone. All your psychological anxieties somehow disappear. It's a magic thing. I noticed this many times, and I notice also when I want to indulge in my, kind of anxieties and my problems, I cannot read Ramayana. Because when I start reading, it disappears. And I want to continue to be worried. So if you want to get rid of all your worries, and you just read that fluid bliss, it is just within the language. It does something to our consciousness. And I must tell you that I never had better experiences in my life than by reading Ramayana, for example. I'm totally taken by it. When you read it, it's like you get the most profound, the deepest experiences in yourself. I am sitting there laughing like an idiot, crying like it's all there. There's such profound emotions inherent in all and how it is inbuilt. It's quite interesting how people react to what Rama does. Yes, Rama is never described as something like, but it is described through attitudes of others, how they relate to him, how they love him, how they totally, accept him. And it's amazing. Just everywhere, in every way, and how he reacts, how he thinks, when he hears this, that he has to leave the Ayodhya from Kaikeyi, and he bows to her and says, "Mother, why you are worried? It's my honor to follow my father's, promise to my father. He gave you the word, and I will fulfill the word of my father. It's an honor." He doesn't see anything in it, but when he comes out, first thought comes to him is, well, how could I tell this to my mother? You could see that he is concerned with totally different issues, and it is rebuilding your psychology. It is teaching you how to be totally dharmic, totally true to yourself. It's profound. It's deeply moving, and especially, when he goes and the whole Ayodhya moves with him. They all came for his coronation, and now instead of coronation, they all move to the forest with him. You can't imagine such a tragedy. It's so, it's the top of all possible visions you could have. I don't know any other literature that could give this vision. And then when he runs away and the chariot comes back and people are still waiting, well, he already crossed the river, and empty chariot comes back, and they're still waiting, hoping that he will come back. And when they see the chariot, only then they start lamenting and crying. Empty chariot. These elements, simple elements, you know, they are inbuilt into such a deep psychological truth that move us to the end that one cannot really find it in one's own life. Such events. You know? My life is very poor in comparison to what I experienced by reading Ramayana. And that is Ramayana, and there is Mahabharata, and there are Vedas, which is out of any comparison. But by the way, Sri Aurobindo puts Valmiki on the top of the list of all the poets. You know, he makes the comparison of all the poets. Valmiki is in the first place, then Vyasa, then Homer. Notice. And then Shakespeare. These are the first four, according to Sri Aurobindo, poets. But Vedic rishis, he doesn't even put on the scale. They are beyond.
What about Kalidasa? What about Kalidasa?
They are in the second range. Yeah, there is Kalidasa, the second layer. He is there. Well, Sri Aurobindo himself was a poet, great poet. If you read his Savagery, you would see what a profound poet he was. We speak about it as the fifth Veda, even, Savagery. And in Savagery, he uses all the imagery from the Vedic literature, by the way. All is the fire, the sun, the wind, the mountains, rivers, all this imagery he took from the Veda, the word. I had my studies, it was actually my research for 3 years, which was funded by Indian government, by the way, for 3 years. And it was the research Vedic imagery in Sri Aurobindo's Savagery. What I discovered in Savagery, Savagery helps us also to understand the Veda, because he gives these psychological meanings there, which when you look into the Vedic texts, suddenly they explain each other. So you have two systems of knowledge which help each other for us to understand. Yeah? To understand the Vedas without Savagery is quite difficult. To understand Savagery without Vedas, nearly impossible. But if you put them together, you get a new possibility. Right. Of course, I'm very interested in the Vedic studies. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yes, so since there is a deep connection between language and consciousness, there's a deep connect between language and consciousness. So human consciousness initially must have developed because of Indriyas. Before language developed, let us say. Because of Indriyas, the consciousness evolved. And when language developed, other concepts were understood, like you said about truth first, that there is no lie but truth. And then also the concept of ahankara came because of language, isn't it? See, if we try to understand the relationship between language as consciousness, initially Indriyas developed consciousness, then because of language, idea of truth came into human mind, and then because of language, idea of ahankara came into the human mind, and then, you know, the journey of life started for the human civilization. Can we assume like that? Is there any reference to this in Vedic literature or any literature?
By the way, Sri Aurobindo says the same way as you are explaining, in a way, that the first language was more on the level of feeling. Feelings were driving the sound, the feeling. Look at how animals are communicating. They also have languages. They have their own speeches. They can speak. And birds, or you can even recognize that this bird is in trouble, or that bird is happy, or something is going on. Somehow we can even read to a certain extent. Or the dogs are barking, they are angry or they are happy. The body language is also language. So there are many languages. And of course, if we come closer to this idea of how we communicate, as it is expressed in Kashmiri and Shaivism, what is this Pashyanti Vak or Madhyama Vak and Vaikhari Vak, we will see that Pashyanti Vak is that kind of like aha moment or something, like intention comes to us. Oh, I have to do it. I know it, but I don't know yet in terms of how to express it. So I have to dress it into language. So I invite language, whatever language I invite. It may be Sanskrit or English or art or music or mathematics or dance or gestures of the body, but I have to express that meaning which came to me. I want to dress it and to express it to my surface consciousness. It's what is happening is very interesting. We are communicating from within to without, and until we make that connection, that bridge, we can't understand totally what is happening within. So it happens to us once in a while that we can say few things which are becoming meaningful to us also in a surprising way. Oh, how come I said this thing which is now makes sense much more than I meant to say. So when my surface consciousness, surface mind understood what it is being communicated from within by the word, brought forward, formed into the language that my surface mind could now capture it or could bridge to the inner being, then that communication takes place. And we are communicating to our surface being and to others at the same time. So I am myself a surface being. I am the other to whom I am communicating from within. And this is the marvelous part of language. We are learning from our deeper self. And that's why Svadhyaya was so important in India. Svadhyaya was the first way of dealing with the text. So you take the text and you read it to yourself silently, observe with your mind the flow of the text which you know perfectly by heart. You read to yourself, and then something happens. There's like with Ramayana, something happens. People go watch movies. They come out and they all cry. Why? Why do they cry? Because between the meaning and sound, between the presentation, between the surface understanding and the inner understanding, there was a bridge. There was an intensity, an experience, and on that, the whole Indian civilization is built.
Hello, can I ask you a question, please?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Comments.
Okay. I have actually two questions, but the simpler one first. What, in your experience, has been the correct pronunciation of Om? Om. Om. What have you felt is the right one?
Well, Om is Om. It's how we pronounce it in the Veda. But Aum, how we pronounce it is in Tantra. Indian tradition is at least known to us, at least 8 or 10,000 years old. Yeah, and yeah, I'm sure it is just underestimation of Indian tradition, because Tilak speaks about 6000 BC. He found evidence in Taittiriya Samhita. If Taittiriya Samhita is 6000 BC, then what to say about Rigveda Samhita? You know? So what time it belongs to. And they are speaking about eternal things. So Indian tradition is very rich, very long. So there are so many ways of pronouncing sounds, and there are so many varieties, so many dialects. In Sanskrit itself, as you have so many places in India, you have many Prakrits. Yeah? All these Indo-Aryan languages came into being from Sanskrit somewhere. And how did they come into being? By certain modulation, certain mispronunciation here and there, you know it very well. You can recognize each other, how you speak, from what region you are coming, because this is a particular way of pronouncing sounds.
Just one more thing I wanted to know from you is that Sri Aurobindo did a lot of work on quantitative meter versus the poetry of stressed syllables. So does Vedic poetry also have quantitative meter? Does a lot of Sanskrit poetry have quantitative meter?
Well, about meters, yes, it's a profound topic. Sanskrit, Vedic Sanskrit is not in the quantitative so much, but you have a varieties, definitely. You will have different varieties within the same Anushtup, Trishtup, Jagati. You will have, instead of 12 syllables, 11 sometimes 13. Instead of 8, you will have 9 and sometimes even 6. Because of some prasaranas. So you will have certain modulations and modifications.
But these syllables are long vowels and short vowels. They are not like stressed, is it?
They have their stressed. Udatta, anudatta, svarita. Anudatta points towards udatta. Svarita is pointing that previous was udatta. Udatta is the stress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you very much for the whole thing. Thank you.
Yeah, by the way, on the accent, one can say a few things, which has to be recovered, I think, in India nowadays, because these anudatta, udatta, and svarita is the way to preserve the text, was the way how to record the text with the proper udatta, with the proper morphological accent in the word. So to preserve that accent, because each word has a particular accent, yeah. It is in the flow of speech, we recognize words by the accentuation. If I shift the accentuation in the flow of English language, you would not recognize my English. It would be some other abracadabra. So we select words by accent. We know this as linguists. So that's why we have this satisfaction, this particular accentuation. Yeah. Otherwise, it would not be understood. If I shift the accent, you would not hear the word in the flow of speech. So what happened in the Vedic Sanskrit, it was accentuated by the Vedic accent. So what happens when you have udatta, which is the highest accent, you need to lower the pitch in the previous syllable. Otherwise, how would you make the high pitch in the next syllable? So how would you make forte if you don't play piano before one note? So to make it forte, to make it high pitch, you need to lower the previous, and that is anudatta. And once you raise the voice, it's interesting. So satisfaction. So once you raise the voice, the next syllable will be falling pitch, and that is svarita. Now, the anudatta, udatta, svarita is low pitch, high pitch, and falling pitch. And that is how Vedic rishis used to mark the accent. Not only by one accent, they noted that the lower pitch is there before the higher pitch is coming, and then the falling pitch is taking place. So they made these markings to help us to preserve the text in the proper accentuation. And this is a very important issue. We don't have time for it, but it could be, we could find some other time for discussion.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Thank you.
If I could just try and moderate a little bit the questions that are coming up, could I request you to raise your hands, your electronic hands, digital hands, and then I can call one by one. We also have questions on the chat. So it's a good idea that you just put the questions on the chat as well. And those who have put your question on the chat, also please raise your hands and we'll request you to ask your questions. Just one clarification with Vladimirji. How much time do you have? Because this topic is so fascinating and your insights are so deep.
Fine.
We could keep you up the whole night and do a
it's morning for me, don't worry. It's morning here, 10 o'clock. I have all day. Please go ahead.
Astu. So I'll just take the questions as they come. So I can see Santosh is raising his physical hand. So Santosh is a very senior naval officer and he's been very, very kind to be with us and a very avid student of the Sanskrit language. I just request him to ask his question, then I'll follow the sequence that I see on my screen for those who raise their hands. Yes, Santosh, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have a question. It was said that the sound of E is a very penetrating sound in the space. And that is true. Every sound has a frequency, and the frequency of E is penetrating. Now, in the Bij mantra, this quality has been used, it seems. In the Bij mantra, clean. When you say pronounce clean, and if you pronounce it a little longer, this sound is really penetrating. Clean. Now, is it that this quality of these sounds have been used in making Bij mantras for a particular effect, or the sound has been made so penetrating to evoke the deity? Could you comment on this?
Sure. Yes. Yes, you're absolutely right. This penetrating sound, you can find it everywhere in all the words, in all the roots, how the roots are built. If you analyze the roots, unfortunately, we didn't have enough time. I could show how this meaning is maintained with this piercing, this this needle piercing. You can see it in all Indo-European languages. This kind of action of movement and penetration, and of course you're right. You can see it in many roots, and the first root is E, to move, to go, and what is to go, to move? It is, if we imagine the background in which everything is static, nothing moves, and
I can't hear the sound. I can't hear the. Somebody's sound is on and it's interfering with the.
We can't hear you. Can you hear Vladimir-ji? Anuradha-ji? I don't think so.
No. Vladimir-ji, would you like to just unmute and speak, because we lost you at the end?
Is it me who is making noise?
No, I think it's coming from some other mic that is also. Request everybody else to please switch off when he's speaking. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, of course, if you start analyzing the sounds and the roots, and especially if I take, for example, the set of roots such as bha, bhi, bhu, bhri. I take bh, and then I take bha, a, bhi, i, bhu, u, bhri, and analyze the meanings, how the meanings shift. You will see immediately the meanings of the vowels. Bha is to shine, to appear, to be everywhere without any obstruction. Bhi is to shrink, to be afraid, to come back to yourself, not to expand, but to shrink. Bhu is to penetrate in space, to occupy firmly the space, as Shobindu describes. And Bhri is to bear the same Bhri, the same etymology, to sustain one's own effort within the limit. And this is quite interesting. I'm just applying the general significance to the sounds, and you can see throughout the roots, not only bha, bhi, bhu, bri, ma, mi, mu, mri, any root you take, any consonant with these vowels extended, and compare them, you will find the same shift of the meaning. So the vowels really bring that significance powerfully forward. So E is narrowing down, whereas R is as it is without any modulation. E is narrowing down, U is expanding and occupying, and the Ri is within the limit, like drilling, breaking, crushing. Yeah, all these words, notice, they are all having, even in English language, in all Indo-European languages, you will have that Dri root, yeah, or Kri, you will have that crushing or breaking significance, working within the limit, drilling through. I'm just leaving you with these sounds. So they are Indo-European meanings. Yeah? And Sanskrit just utilizes them in the best way, in the most regular way. That's why it has power. When we speak Sanskrit language, it has power because of that, because of its purity in sound. Purity, meaning and sound are well connected and well maintained. I do not know whether it answers. I kind of went vast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
May I ask one more question?
Santuti.
Have the beach mantra been analyzed for their sound content or for any particular pattern of sound in them?
Definitely, that mantra has a particular sound content, and it works within the sound also, especially in the Vedic sense, in the Rig Veda. Rig Veda is very subtle, very sensitive towards what root to use, what word to use. It is like poets. Poets are choosing their words carefully. They feel that this word is not working. Yeah, big will not work here. Great will not work. How do they know? Immense will work. Immense ocean when we want to show the extension, or or a huge ocean if you want to show but big is bulky, but huge has an extension. How do we know this? We know it from the sound. From that sound value, which is inbuilt in us. We are very sensitive, very intuitive about it. Because when we articulate sounds, they create a particular significance within us. It's a particular power within our psyche. And Sanskrit utilizes this very well. Well, it builds on this property. So this apparatus, if our apparatus would be different, if it would be, I don't know, dolphins, we would generate different sounds. Yeah? But since our apparatus is such that we have the caves, the nasal cave, the palate, the teeth, the tongue, so this setting, this notice 5 I put on my face. That's all possible articulations in all possible ways. Incredible system of the articulatory devices with meaningful sense of them, which generates words, roots, which can be true to its own sound. That Brahaspati's sound, the Brahaspati's word, is still present in Indra's articulation.
Thank you so much for the wonderful lecture.
Thank you very much. Vladimir, I'd like to just request 2 of our very young undergraduate students who have questions to unmute and speak. So I'd like to request Parag. Parag, would you like to, Parag Daharwal, would you like
Yes,
to please unmute and ask your question?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, ma'am, and good morning, sir. So, sir, when we chant Vedic mantras, Vedic scholars use their hands, like typically they call like their hand movement as swaras. So, what is the significance of using swaras during the Vedic mantra chanting?
The hand, what is this? Or svaras, or you mean the Vedic accentuation? What is the purpose?
Yes, sir.
The hand movements that accompany the swaras. So
Right.
that's
What is the use of the hand? The hand helps us to bring it into the physical consciousness, not to forget. It's one more system of correlation, yeah, which helps to not to forget. Even if you forget the sound, the hand will remember, so it will help you to. And of course, there were many ways of learning the text. There are different modalities. You can read the text in many ways. Yes, you know these things. From how the text was learned. The text was not learned by just learning one hymn, not Agnimihile Purohitam. There are many ways. There you start with one word and first word and the last word. Then first, second word, last and last word. So and you come to the middle. Or there are many, many ways, many malas you combine with the words until the hymn is totally memorized and you can't ever forget. And by the way, this is a very interesting feature of Sanskrit tradition. When European scholars came and they collected the texts from different regions of India, from the north, south, middle India, and you know, you have your teacher has teacher. You don't have time to travel to the north and check how they recite the Rig Veda. Huh? You're in your village, your Gurukulam is there for thousands of years, so you learn from your teacher and pass knowledge to your student. When they compared the texts recorded from all sides of India, they were stunned because these texts were identical. Nearly identical, without any drastic modulation or modification. That means something, huh? That the system is so perfected that the system of oral transmission is much more perfect than transmission through written word. Because usually when they were writing, these were the boys who were rewriting, these were not. So they were making mistakes, few rewritten texts, and you have so many mistakes. But oral tradition has no mistakes. That means we are dealing with authentic text over thousands of years. And it's, of course, it's a great gratitude and thanks to this Brahmanic tradition, which keeps up with this even today. Even nowadays, they learn by heart these texts and transmit them by heart. By the way, in Aitareya Brahmana, there is a prohibition for those who study the Veda by heart to write it down. So it could not be written down. It should be transmitted only orally. That was the responsibility of the teacher, to choose the disciple and to transmit to him this knowledge. Responsibility, it's a high responsibility. It's whom he chooses as the vehicle for this knowledge, for transmission. It's something to think of. It's not just text written and then it is burnt, as Alexandria library was burnt and nothing is left. And nobody remembers nothing. In India, this knowledge cannot be burnt. It is in the memory of Hindus. It lives in their hearts. Yeah? So.
Dhanyavadaha. Parag, I hope your question was answered there. Satisfactory.
One more question it is very small question.
Jaldi.
Yeah. Sir, when we chant Sanskrit mantras and especially in Vedic mantras, there is one word called gum. In, like, for example, there is one mantra, Om Gananam Tva Gadpati Gum Havamahe Nidhinam Tva Nidhipati Gum Havamahe. So what is the significance and why we chant the word gum? Basically, when I chant these mantras, so I don't find any meaning of the word gum. So can you explain about this word gum?
Many bija mantras which also can't be explained. Hrim, Klim, Gum. And Gum is more connected with Ganapati, I think. And it kind of creates that foundation of like solid foundation on which it can be held, something. It's a psychological more than semantic. Well, psychological and semantic, as we saw, they are going closely together. So. there is no kind of scientific answer to it, that why, but yeah, but it makes sense when you do it, and it supports the mantra, and it holds your consciousness well focused. And as it is said by Sayana, once the mantras are sounding in the consciousness of the speaker, the gods vibrate and becoming born in his consciousness. It is the way to bring to birth the Godhead within yourself.
Can we say that each mantras have no dictionary meaning, but they have that particular sound frequency which is used in them?
Yeah, it is in a way close from that general significance of Brahaspati's word, all more derived and more articulated in terms of grammar. Indra's language is coming into being. Indra is the first grammarian. You know, the Vyakaranam is called Aindram because Indra is the creator of grammar. He created the forms of the language, of the words, suffixes, prefixes, varnamala. Everything is created by Indra for the sake of putting it together, using it for the sake of using the power of the sound in the meaningful way, and being able to apply it to any different context, not only to a particular context where it is totally true, but in the context where it is not true. So it may create the truth in that untrue context. Being optimistic.
Bahudanyavada. There's another question that we have by Krishnapani Kesirajuji, who heads the Ritambhara Wellness Organization, Sanskrit scholar himself. So Krishnapani, would you like to kindly unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thank you, Anuradha. I'm audible?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much, Anuradha.
There, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Yatseko. My question is regarding the Rigvedic mantra. Chatvari Shrunga Trayovasya Pada Tve Shirshya Saptahasta Swasya Trita Bhaddho Vrushabho Roraviti Mahadevo Martyagama Vivesha is a very famous mantra which is found in the other Vedas also. It is when you spoke about the Mahabhashya, I remembered this because Patanjali gives a grammatical interpretation to this mantra. I would like to have your views on this. And also the second aspect is, are there any other Vedic mantras which have a linguistic or grammatical connotation to it?
Well, the whole, yes, this Dirghatama Uchatya has a beautiful long hymn with many mantras there explaining these four levels of speech which are coming into being, to which we refer as four levels, as Paravak, Pashyanti, Madhyama, and Vaikhari in the Tantric tradition later. And these also, the four Shringas of the Purusha, are actually those four levels of speech, actually. And there are many references in the Rig Veda, but they are kind of packed in the form of the for the initiated. Yeah, it is not kind of explained. The Rig Vedas are not trying to explain things. They are indicating some mystic knowledge to which you have to have an access. And once access is given to you, either by the teacher or initiation or by the grace, you just this meaning is revealed to you, then you can see that what he is speaking about, why she is of four, Chatushpadi and Ekapadi, and what does he mean by all this? Ashtapadi, Navapadi. So what is all these padis? Yeah, so the speech. Why she is on one leg and she is on four legs, and then on 8 and on 9. Who can really say? Yeah? But if we look into it deeper, we start analyzing, it is a topic in itself. I would love to have this linguistic discussion. Maybe some other time when we have more time for this. But I would like to give you a kind of more elaborate answer, or what I think about. Because I thought about this quite a lot. What are these 4 levels of speech? And in Tantra they are well known. But how it is in the Veda, how they view it in the Veda. And also Patanjali, how he deals with it, and how it shifted towards more mental structure of consciousness, because Patanjali is already speaking in a language which is closer to us. He says that varnas do not have meaning by themselves; they have meaning only in the morphema, in the word form. That means we are shifting towards mental structure of consciousness. But there was Varna Spota before, where the Varna itself has a meaning. And that's what I was trying to speak about, that why big ocean and huge ocean are 2 different oceans, because of the content of the sound, yeah? And not because of anything else. But because mentally these are two similar concepts, big and great and huge. Yeah? From the mental point of view, there is not a big difference, but from the point of view of the sound, articulation of the meaning, and because of that, the flavor of the meaning, and because of that, the very meaning is very different. So huge and big are 2 different meanings, though for the mind, they are very similar. They are synonyms.
I think, as you rightly said, this needs another session you should be able to conduct for us to get a deeper meaning of these mantras and the connection with linguistics.
I would just like to mention here that Vladimirji offers online courses continuously. He's offering some course or the other, and passionate about enabling any real seeker to connect to the sound, the core essence of these sounds and Vedic words. So I can see how we can share contact information about how to join these classes, because he does them very regularly in different ways. So I'll definitely do that. Vladimirji, please, we can see how to make that available to everybody.
Sure, lovely. Would be very happy to do it. Yeah,
and
we have
class on. I said, and of course, we'll invite you to do a course for us at the Center of Indian Knowledge Systems also at IIT Kharagpur itself. So that's something that we are sincerely looking forward to doing, is that all these sessions that we've had are really like teasers and trailers to get you want to delve deeper. And then we are going to try and coax our esteemed speakers to give us a little more of their time, because everybody's so busy also. There's a lot of demand. We'll request them to also take us into consideration and lead us through a few hours of in-depth appreciation of all of this that we are getting exposed to right now. So you were saying something about your class. Would you like to continue that? And then I'd request Professor Joycean to share his thoughts and then take up the questions again after that. So yes.
Yeah, I was mentioning that there is a class on etymology. There is also the ongoing sessions on hymns to the mystic fire in Sri Aurobindo's interpretation, which are profound actually. And there we also look into etymological meaning of each word, why rishis are using these words and not those, and what it really means in a deeper sense, in the sense of Brahaspati's word, not in the sense of Indra's word. Yeah. So how that vibration is needed to convey that particular meaning which Rishi wants to convey. So it's more kind of work on etymology. And we had very good sessions on etymology with a group with Anuradha. Anuradha brought the whole group of students and scholars. So we had 10 sessions on just overviewing the etymological approach to Sanskrit language.
Oh, Dhanyavad. May I request Professor Joycean, because his connection is going in and out. So I'd like you to kindly request you. So as I mentioned, Professor Joyson heads the Center of Excellence for Indian Knowledge Systems, and he is very passionate about word, connection, sounds in his own work as well. So, Professor Joyson, would you please like to share your thoughts and comments on the session of Dr. Vladimirji?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, now, yes.
Okay, I'm audible?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so first I think I almost listened to the entire presentation, deliberation, the talk by Vladimir ji. I think it was not a talk, it was something which connected us to that age and bring the fruits of that age. So in that sense, it was divine, it is divine, and it shall be divine with us. I think in my life, I have never heard many talks like this. And this is absolutely divine. I like to be very quick and small. I recall my school days in the physics lab when we are playing with the xylophone, different shapes and containers with different amount of water which is formed, which is filled up the container, and different amount of void, So then we found out that there is a relationship between form, which is that water, and formless, which is that air in that column, an amount of sound that it makes. So am I audible? Then I'll go ahead.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I think that gave us a clue. And then when I got to IIT Kharagpur and I met a lot of my brilliant hallmates like Professor Parthapratim Chakravarti and some of his batchmates in computer science and others, then my ideas expanded about the ideas of what is sound and what is volume, what is cosmos. And then one day I realized that when I'm traveling in a car and moving in an open field, I experience one kind of sound. And when I'm going under a bridge with pillars coming in between and experiencing another kind of sound. So then I realized that sound variation which I had heard in my physics classroom when I was a student, and now I'm traveling to Kharagpur in a car in different situations, almost belong to the same science. And it is at this point I started reading the books of Sri Aurobindo and others. And then I came to know that in our Vedic text, the sound is Artha, which is Artha. And when Shabda and Artha comes together and they become one, we call it Vak. From the word, we have the natural body. Today, the speech by Vladimir ji was more than a delight, which I said right in the beginning, because he was explaining before he started. And he took us to the times of the ages of rishis, which was in the last Treta Yuga or Satya Yuga. And he's also taking us to the age of another Krita Yuga and Satya Yuga, which is unfolding in the coming centuries, after the end of this Iron Age. So the beauty of this understanding is that understanding sound, vibrations, meaning, linguistics is just not a linear programming. It's not a linear programming of history. They come in cycles. So humanity revives the knowledge which is already there in the universe, which is oracular, which is Shruti, and then we put it on text in a particular cycle of a sage. Then we have all these shastras like Upanishads, Puranas, Tantras, and everything. It becomes the Smritis. And then again it is lost. But it's lost from us, but it's never lost in the ether, in the cosmos. And again the next cycles, the sages recover it. And as Sri Aurobindo says, the 7 sages of Angirashas are waiting to recover that ancient meaning and give us that ancient meaning so that
we go back to the psychosomatic traditions of the Vedas. So today, Anuradha, I felt that has started, that it has been recovered with this brilliant speech by Vladimir Ji. I think there is a little bit or a lot of sainthood in the presence of Vladimir Ji. He is not a scholar. He is just not an intellect, but he's a man. He took level of understanding, perception, and vocal empathy. Vocal empathy. Anna knows it. Anuradha knows it. We have the amplitude between sound and meaning is maximum. But when we finally enter Madhyama to Pashwanti, Tad Vishnu Param Padam Sada Pashwanti Surya. So the Devatas see that Vak from a distance, and the Rishis go and merge with it. So they see the Param Padam, Param Padam. So in the Rig Veda, so this is a beautiful simile of Sri Ramakrishna. I mean, you can see the light inside the lantern, but the insect is just outside the glass. So this is the stage of the Devatas, the Devas. But the Rishis are the Param Devatas, They have cracked the glass of the lantern and they have entered inside and they are one with the light, which is the word of God. As it is written in the Bible, in the beginning there is the word is with God, and the word is God. That means Bak, Brahman, they're together. So that is Brahaspati or Brahmanashpati or Brahma, and the Shakti is Savitri or Saraswati or Vak. That is all about it. I think this beautiful understanding, one day, Anuradha, I was waiting, there'll be someone who will be coming and discussing these things with us. Just not discussing, but sharing his feelings with us. Just not sharing his feelings with us, but transport us to his level of realization. I think August 25th, 2021, under Sanskritotsav 2021 has been such a day where Rishi Vladimir Ji has transported us to that infinite world of bliss, Satchidananda Swayam. I think we are very blessed, and I convey my heartfelt pranam to Vladimir Ji that we are really lucky. I mean, because this is not an intellectual workshop. This has transcended the border of just intellect. This has become intuitive, and it is about to transcend the intuitive and enter higher levels in the hierarchy of minds, as portrayed by Sri Aurobindo in the hour of God, So I think today is a very lucky day for us, and I thank Anuradha and Anvay to give us this golden opportunity. I am under a very limited channel of Vak because I am talking through the mobile, but even the mobile has given me an opportunity to transport my words through whatever Vak this 4G or 5G allows us to transmit. So even today, wireless communication, mobile technology, and transportation is based on the same ancient knowledge of Sabda and Artha. Whether it's Vedic science or communication sciences, it is the same Brahma Jnana which pervades the two sides of knowledge. One is spiritual and one is material. So this is the idea of Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo. Everything is divine. Everything is Purnya. There is no separation between the material and the spiritual. It is supramental. It's infinite. So I think today we have got that touch. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you.
I hope I made some sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Joyda, for Professor Joysin for that. I said Joyda because of
Joyda. Just go ahead with Joyda. Go ahead with Joyda.
Any connections, but yes, thank you very much again for those very warm words and heartfelt words of appreciation and acknowledgement of the source from which Vladimir Ji generally is able to connect. I mean, I've known him for many years now, and what you have said only.
I'm sure if Anuradha, I'm interrupting you. I'm sure if there is something called transmigration, if there's something called reincarnation, if something's called metempsychosis, then I'm sure Vladimir Ji was once in some previous life an Indian in some Rishi ashram or Rishi Balak, where he was transporting these Vedic words in some different age. Today he's a Russian. That's the beauty of Vedic knowledge. There is no Russian or Indian or Scandinavian or Islam or Hindu or Christian in this. This is universal plane of spirituality. Religions are much below. We are at the level of universal spirituality. Where a Baptist or a Jew or a Hindu or a Buddhist, they all belong to that one body of truth. As Sri Aurobindo always loved this line, and so Swami Vivekananda, Ekasat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. Rig Veda Mandala 1, 164 Sukta by Rishi Dirghatama. So that is wonderful, absolutely wonderful. So I think today we had a glimpse of that. Thanks so much, Anne and Anuradha. That's why I desperately downloaded WebEx on my phone. Just 15 minutes back, I did not have WebEx, and Vak Saraswati helped me to do that. And then I could get the connection. And before this session had finished, I could log in, and I have made my little observation. So this is the grace of Saraswati, Savitri. It cannot happen without that grace. So I'm very blessed. Pranam to all of you. Pranam to all of you. Pranam to all of you. Thank you. Thank you. And Anuradha gave me the hint to get on the mobile to go on the internet of my phone. So she's a messenger of Vak. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely.
Thank you. Vladimir-ji, if I can also just take a few more because questions abound still. We have a few hands still raised. Professor Kishore has been wanting to ask something for a while. Then we also had Kuldeep-ji. We had a few students' questions there. So if you have the time, we could just ask you those questions. Is that fine with you?
Yeah, with me, it's
okay. Because we just, it's not so...
the whole day in front, so don't worry about me. Yeah. I think you have to worry about you because you're already in the night somewhere, 10 o'clock or something.
No, 8:15 bhavati, but chinta mastu. So, Kishorji, Bhavan Kripaya Prashnam Pritchati, would you like to please unmute and ask your question?
Dr. Vladimir, it is very good to hear you and importance of the sound and accent. That's what I could gather. And what I learned actually says when I was learning languages, it was that the Sanskrit and German are one or two of the languages which had, because over the years we have learned to document in the form of a written word. Okay, whatever we learned earlier, we were learning through listening, as you said, through Srota, we were learning, but later on it became documentation in the form of writing. And I find that especially in English, we have silent letters. And then we see French, the silent letters are too long. There are combinations of A and E, they're so long. And the other thing is, yes, you said vowels are important. Vowels are definitely important there also. But we have a very long spelling and we hardly have to produce some screeching sound. It becomes very difficult. And of course, best way is to learn through listening rather than reading. And thankfully, with the technology that is available now, we can come back to Srota medium again. But what is your view about that? Could we think in terms of a different way of, are we seeing in terms of the language growth, writing may come to may not be necessary to write in future?
Right, that's a provoking question, yes.
And I do have another observation to make. I recall, a long time ago when I was in my class 6 or 7 or 8, our biology teacher would tell, or I would say science teacher, she would tell us that whatever you speak is going to remain forever in this universe. The sound remains. It's never
Sound
lost.
is always, yes, there.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you for these provocative thoughts. And yes, it's rather thoughts rather than questions. So they have no answers, of course. They are just there for us to keep them forever and to try to figure out through our life what it really means. Yeah. There are no answers like answers given which could be satisfactory or one. Yes, but you are right. Absolutely, the sound is living, and it is the ongoing consciousness which is expressing itself in new forms. And there are many languages. A Sanskrit language is perfect. It's a Sanskritam. Yes, it is perfected. It is made totally holistic, and it's an instrument of perfect consciousness through which you can present a higher consciousness without distortions in a way. But even there was some development, and we can see over time from the Vedic Sanskrit to the modern, there was a development of particular kind, though the language is the same, which is unique because language doesn't live longer than 500 years. Take any normal Prakrit language. In 500 years, it changes in an unrecognizable way. You know? But Sanskrit maintained its identity from the immemorial times, from prehistoric times, the same language till nowadays. So even if we modulate nowadays, Sanskrita Bharati speaks more spoken language, still it is the same Sanskrit language. Just selection is a bit narrow because we are so utilitarian nowadays that we have no time to really express deeper truths. We have to only be, active and proactive in doing things. But still, it is the same language, the same power. It bears the same power. And every time we pronounce, we use this language, it vibrates and it connects deeper layers of our consciousness. It connects us to the origins of our speech. That's the power of Sanskrit. And that's why Mother in Sri Aurobindo wanted this language to be the national language of India. Yeah? There was the whole movement, the whole movement in India to make it national language of India in 4750. Ambedkar, he was moving everywhere. So there was, in India lost, there was a vote, only one vote was more over the vote that Sanskrit would be the national language to Hindi. Only one vote.
Yeah, I'm told only one vote pledged the American language, working language as English as against German.
It's amazing. Yes, thank
One
you.
vote. And the other interesting thing about the American English is it's more like German in the sense, or like Hindi or Sanskrit, where you write what you speak.
Little more.
Yeah, Sanskrit is totally what you write, what you speak, you write. There is no more, there is no modulation, modification, because it is perfected in a way. There was an anecdote. Maybe it's a good place to mention it. When all the Ambedkar and everybody came to the minister to say, let us promote Sanskrit and make Sanskrit national language of India, he said, but where do you see Sanskrit nowadays? There's nowhere Sanskrit today, so why do you come with this idea? And there was one Muslim in the group, Muslim who was promoting Sanskrit, by the way, a Sanskrit teacher, and he said, sir, may I suggest something? He said, why do we have lion on our emblem of India? Let us put donkey. Where did you see lion nowadays? Donkeys are everywhere. So this is something about Sanskrit. It brings some higher level in the nation. Vivekananda said, if you want to raise your level, learn Sanskrit. This is the raising of the level of consciousness, and it will be understood and will be valued in India only, that Sanskrit level of consciousness. For the linguist, it's very important to understand the perfection of this language.
Thank you very much, because I was also reminded of what the mother said. She says that just like every child in France speaks French, every child in India should know Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is a language of India's soul. So if you know this language, then you can connect to the very essence and spirit of this nation, of the civilization. So thank you very much for that important reminder. I'd like to ask Nilanjana Ghosh, who also had a question yesterday but didn't get an opportunity. Nilanjana, would you ask your question, please? You have vocal problems. Okay. Well, let me just see if I can read your question out. In the meanwhile, could I request... wait, let me just see if I can find your question.
Kuldeep, you had a question or
Yeah.
you already asked?
So, yeah, Kuldeep has a question, but since I know that Kuldeep will have to remain here till the end, I'm taking advantage of the fact of asking the others who might need to leave. Kuldeep ji can't leave. He's the one who's hosting the show, so his question will definitely get addressed. But I know the others might leave here, dropping in numbers also.
In the quadrangle of the Chaturvedi, he is the Brahma holding the Atharva Veda. Yeah, the others are Hota, Adharju, and Ritik.
Satyam.
The
So I've
three
got
other Vedas.
Kuldeep, with your permission, I'll just take the others' questions. So we have Nilanjana Ghosh who's saying that can we, or if we contrast the modern psycholinguistics from Sanskrit from the aspects of kinesthesis and sublimity, and through this can we redefine in a much broader terms the concept of poetics and poesy? It's a very technical question.
Yes, very big yes, capital yes, definitely. This understanding of the value of articulation and the meaning, putting it consciously articulating sounds, is the way to conscious speech. Unfortunately, we speak a very formal, very structural, very mental language, very conceptual. Concept itself is already void of meaning. It's a mental formulation of some kind. It's a mental representative. It's not really the real living being. To make it living being, you need the sound, the value of sound, and that is the poets. We should be all poets from now on. We have to learn to compose through the sounds, articulate through the powers of sounds and meanings of sounds what we want to communicate. Since we communicate on the surface, it's not so important when, we're just like, but if we want to communicate deeper realities, deeper connection, we need this knowledge.
Thank you. We also have another question by Swarnadeep Mitra ji. Swarnadeep ji, are you still there? And can you unmute and ask your question? All right.
Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes, please.
So I would like to first thank Dr. Vladimir. It was an amazing talk. I was hooked on to every single word. Thank you so much. I just have one question. We have always heard that Sanskrit had an impact on Western European languages like German, as well as there's a lot of talk about this, but I've never had the opportunity to ask about the Eastern European languages, in particular Russian. So, how much impact or influence would you say that Sanskrit as well as Indian philosophical traditions had on Russian literature or Russian way of life?
Yeah, way of life I can't say, but language-wise, yes. All Slavic languages, Slavic, notice, Shravas, Slavic, and this is exactly the same etymology. Shru, sluchать. Slavic is from Shravas, from slovo. Slovo means word in Ukrainian and Russian and Slavic languages. Slavic itself is from Slava, Shravas as fame, and Shravas as the word, because word and fame go together. So these are very close in every way, and they have a huge percentage of words. Most unexpected words can trace their origin to Sanskrit.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I remember you had said that the name Ukraine, from where you hail,
Right. Ukraine is Uktriani. You see, Ukrainians were called in one manuscript as Uktriani. There is one manuscript which nobody understands where it comes from, 17th century. It's written Uktriani, Glagolymaya Brahmani. I'm citing in old Ukrainian. Uktriani, Glagolymaya Brahmani, Ostrovice, мясо не едяше, вино не пьюше. So I translate. The Ukrainians, Uktriani, they call themselves Brahmanas, Brahmins. They don't eat meat, they don't drink wine. They offer to their gods with flowers and honey. This is a quotation from the text. Nobody knows where it comes from, why it is there, how to deal with it. What kind of Brahmins are there? Uktriani. But then if you look into this Uktri, you will see that Uktar, Vaktar, is a Vaktaram avatu, avatumam avatu Vaktaram. It is that Vaktar. And it's Vaktri, Uktri, yes? And from here, Russian and Ukrainian Uchitel, Uchtel. Tel is 3 suffix, and Uch is Vach, weak form. Yeah? So it's incredible if you think. Uchitel means the teacher, the one who carries the word. So Uktriania, the carriers of the word, they call themselves Brahmani. And Brahmana is the one who carries the word, because Brahman is the word. The first meaning is the word, not the spirit. The spirit comes later. Brahman is the word. Brahmanaspati is the one, the Lord of the word, of the hymn. So you can see the connection.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes. So I've got Payal Reji, who also has a question. Would you like to unmute and ask?
Yes. My question is, how this philosophy of sound has been translated into music or dance, especially in the context of dance, because dancing is constituted by both sound and body movement. So my question is, how the sounds have been translated into different body movement or mudras, as we called it.
It's rather not sound, it's more language, or the word. Yeah? The word can be expressed not only in the sound way, but also in the gesture, in the movement. You know, there are many avadhanas in India. I was making this film on Ashtavadhanam. I would recommend you to see this. This is really something. There are avadhanis in India who are playing these, avadhanas. Yeah, I will not speak about it because it's a topic in itself. So I attended Shatavadhanam, and also there is Sahasravadhanis who would have this 21-day composing 1,000 verses on the spot. But there are other avadhanas, like Netra Avadhana, where you can communicate through look. You can say through how you look, or gesture, or so there are many languages which can be used, and dance is one of those languages.
Thank you so much.
Great.
I would also just like to mention to the audience that this Avadhanam is a very unique practice within the Sanskrit literary traditions, or the Sanskrit practice traditions, if I may say so. But it's not only Sanskrit, but we have it in several regional languages as well. But we have somebody called R. Shatavadhani, R. Ganesha, who's done more than 100 Shatavadhanams, 100 Pritchakas, people asking him 100 different questions, and he's responding to all of that, holding it in his mind. So it's fabulous, the kind of mind power, the things that the language allows. So yes, I sincerely hope we can have that opportunity also sometime at the center to host an Avadhani and get a treat of that for all of us. So I'd like to request Kuldeep ji. Kuldeep ji, all yours. And then Anvay sir, Anvay ji, you to your remarks as a session. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Anuradha ma'am, for giving this opportunity for asking question. And Dr. Vladimir, it was wonderful talk, and I really like how beautifully you explained the effect of Ramayana on your mind, and suddenly all the problems vanishes. I just wanted to know more about your experiences of reading Mahabharata as compared to Ramayana, since both are very different type of story with very different character. Like Ram is totally black and white, and on the other hand we have Krishna, which is like in a gray area sometimes. So is there any difference you feel while reading both the texts in your emotions? Like, does it calm down like Ramayana, or like it forces you to work more? What type of emotions you experience while reading Mahabharata?
Thank you for this. This is yeah, Vyasa is very different from Valmiki in a way. Vyasa is more sophisticated in language. It's he's not so smooth like Valmiki is smooth. He's flowing. You know? He's taking you by something else. It's some kind of higher flow of consciousness or something, and he adds to it. He is not surprising you with shifts. Vyasa is more. It's a surprise in each shloka in a way. Somewhere there is always something, and even in Indian tradition they believe that he was doing it because Ganesha was writing down, so. To rest a bit, because Ganesha said he will stop writing down the Mahabharata if he will stop speaking. So he was composing in such a way that Ganesha was puzzled what it means, and before he could figure out what it means, in that moment Vyasa could rest a bit, so that was the way how it was done, and there is some truth in it, truth in the usage of language, definitely. Valmiki is just, he takes you by the heart, something. It's going straight into the heart, and Vyasa is more like an mental consciousness, something vast and huge and complex and philosophical and profound. And the whole story is profound, many-faceted, many puzzled stories. Savitri is the story of Savitri, Markandeya speaks, or the whole, one after the other. One is better than the other. So Valmiki is more like a one flood of uninterrupted, like Ganga, inspiring you in every way, in every turn, in every word. Vyasa is more sophisticated, like he takes you through the mountains, through the valleys, you have to climb and fall and this and that. Yeah, I do not know whether it answers, but it feels like this.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yes. Dhanyawada. There was just one more question by Krishnapani Kesirajuji, who said that the language of Zen Avesta is said to be very close to that of the Rig Veda.
Absolutely.
Would you like to share your thoughts on that?
If you listen to the recitations of Avesta, especially the oldest parts, you would not make a distinction between the Rig Veda and Avesta. You will be surprised. You will say that is Rig Veda and that is Avesta. That's much I want to tell you. You have to listen to it, to recitation. That's true. It's very close. Especially the Gathas, the oldest parts of Avesta.
But it's interesting that they took up the Ahura Mazda as their, the Asura, or the Ahura became their key figure. So that was interesting.
But Asura in the Veda is not Asura of the. So Asura is the great being from root as, to be. Asura is the one who possesses the power. Indra is Asura, Varuna is Asura. Everybody is Asura. Agni, they are Asuras. But why? Because the Asu is the power of life, of being. And then later it becomes Asura, not Sura. So there are two different words, Asura with Shotu and Asura with Longu. So with not light, with no light. And so these two are different words.
Astu. I have one question regarding the concept of the PIE, the Proto-Indo-European, which was attributed as the source of the Sanskritic branch and the European languages of the Greco-Latino. What is your take on that PIE theory and the Aryan-Dravidian divide that was built on the basis of a linguistic framework?
I think it was the beginning like this, and now it is developing, and I don't think it will stay only as against everyone. Of course, there is the Proto-Indo-European languages, definitely. And Sanskrit is the origin because Sanskrit refers to its own system of roots. If it would be not so, of course, there was some development. There is always some development. From Vedic to classical, you can see the development. But it is not a drastic development, So it's not something which you cannot recognize the language. It's just richer in the grammatical and other forms. Regarding the Dravidian origin, and Sri Aurobindo speaks about common origin from Dravidian and Indo-European or Sanskrit origin, Vedic. So Vedic and Dravidian were one long ago. And we can see it once in a while here and there in the old words such as Amba is Amma becomes. So we have many indications, Appa from up root. So he points out to some unknown past where they were coming from one origin. And then they, of course, deviated. Dravidians went one way and Vedic development, Aryan languages went other way.
Okay.
So you can find this also interesting that in a Vedic language the prefixation is free from the roots and from the verbs, and prefixes can be found in any position before, like for example, griham gacchati. Yes, you can say he goes home with separate from gacchati, or you can say even griham gacchati at the end. So prefix had its own accent. It was a separate word, which points us to the Dravidian languages where there is no prefixation at all. There is root and many affixes. So in that sense, agglutinative type of Dravidian languages is some kind of development from some origin where the prefixation was free. And we can see also that agglutination is also found in the more in the Veda, especially these endings like bhyam, bhich. They were treated in the terms of external sandhis as separate words, which came together. Well, I don't want to go into grammar too much.
Too technical, yes. But so Bahu Dhanyavada, there's a lot of appreciation also. We've got Subbarao Nagarajanji saying excellent enlightening talk, sir. Abundant knowledge gained thanks to Vladimir sir and the organizers. So thank you very much for that. And I think it's time now to let you also rest your voice, because you've been there with us for over 2 hours. And I think it's people have been listening with rapt attention because we still have a substantial audience that has stayed back. So I think it only speaks for how enriching your sharing has been. So I request Dr. Anvay Mukhopadhyay to please share his thoughts as the chair of the session and closing remarks. I'll come back to you after that.
Thank you, Dr. Vladimirji, for this wonderful speech. And as I had told you even before the beginning of the session, this is an area which is very close to my heart, because Aurobindo was my companion throughout my undergrad years. Calcutta is not something that you generally associate with the holy city, but nevertheless, for me, my undergrad years were spent on Aurobindo, Savitri, Life Divine, all these things. But, I was continuously being reminded of my experience of, going through these walks, going through these shastras, as it were, in the city of Varanasi, because it was in Varanasi that I came in close contact with this entire corpus, this wonderful, glittering corpus of, Kashmir Shaivite texts. And so there is Spanda Shastra, there is Pratyabhijna Shastra, and there is, of course, this notion of this fourfold Bach and all these things. But the point is that even though all these things are different, there are also connections between them. So between Pratyabhijna and Spanda, there is some kind of connection. And I think some individuals from the audience were talking about, vibration and frequency. And it's interesting that, in fact, in Kashmir Shevite texts, we have reference to Spanda as well as to Vak. And the interesting thing about the Sanskrit language and the philosophy of the Sanskrit language, this is a very important area which I think all of us should study, especially those of us who study languages and literatures, and not just people who are studying Sanskrit language and literature, even people who are studying comparative literature, or people who are studying linguistics in general, or English literature for that matter, or communication studies for that matter. Because in the Sanskritic philosophy of language, what is interesting is that first you have this notion of Shabdana. So what Jerry is talking about, consciousness being a kind of process of Shabdana. So Shabda and consciousness, Shabda and thought are, as it were, indistinguishable. And then there is also this very interesting idea of Sahitya. We often think that Sahitya is just the Sanskrit term for literature, but that's not the case. And of course, literature is something different. It's something which is related to the concept of writing, and it's about togetherness. But I am gradually coming to understand that Sahitya operates at a very complex ontological level. When we talks about Sahitya, the notion of Sahitya, all these things in the context of Sanskrit language and literature. For instance, I think that, when we talk about Sahitya, we are talking about the Sahitya, the harmonious togetherness of Shabda and Artha. So Kalidasa talks about that. He talks about, that relationship being like, the intimate relation between Parvati and Parameshwara. And then Vamaha talks about Sahitya being the essence of Kavya. So, Shabdartha, Sahitya, Kavya. So that kind of idea is there. But I think it's even at the level of language that we have this notion of Sahitya, because language is something which, in the Sanskrit context, relates the superhuman with the human, the divine with the human, and also the human with the non-human living beings. And that's very important, because when we think about texts like the Paratrishika Vivarana and so on and so forth, the Paratrishika Vivarana, for instance, it's by Abhinavagupta, he is talking about Parabhak. So Parabhak is something which encapsulates everything, the entire world, as well as the entire corpus of words. So all living entities are implicated in this. So I think a non-anthropocentric notion of language, which the West is still looking for probably, so that's also there, and this is something which needs to be excavated. And you were wonderfully talking about the sonic aspect of words, sonic aspects of the varnas, which is very interesting as far as Sanskrit words, as far as the Sanskrit language is concerned, because a word is something, a Sanskrit word is something which we feel, and which has a kind of, which gives us a multimodal experience. So it has a sonic dimension, it has a visual dimension. For instance, it also helps you in visualizing something. A Vijayantra, for instance, is related to the notion of dhyana. So that dhyana and the utterance of the Vijayantra goes, these two things go together, because that visual aspect and the sonic aspect are interconnected, closely interconnected. And I think this is something which is a wonderful thing. And after Derrida, especially in our discipline, we are talking a lot about anti-logocentrism and so on and so forth. But even in the West, people have started talking about the difference between logocentrism and phonocentrism. For instance, when we talk about utterances, Adriana Cavaredo, for instance, talks about the pranava in her work. She says that you look at the Sanskrit tradition and you will find that Shabda is not just something which is conceptual, which is not just logos, but it's something which is also sound. So sound meaning everything is fused together in the universe of Sanskrit words. So I think that's why it was a wonderful experience for me to to feel, as it were, this divine dimension of words with you. So thank you very much for giving us this experience. Thank you. Namaste.
Bahut dhanyavadaha, Anvay Mahodaya, for Anvay Bhrata rather, for your personal sharing as well, understanding relationship of sound. There's an echo. So there was just last that Jaisal ji was saying. Kuldeep ji, could you just mute everybody else, please? Thank you. Yeah. So Jaisal ji she says, how early should one groom a child with Sanskrit? At the age of 1.5, 4, 7? What is that? And then your last remarks, please.
I think it has to start from prenatal education. It has to start when you're pregnant. You have to read a lot of texts, mantras. Not read maybe because it's not suggested to read it in an aggressive way, so especially for pregnant women, but to listen, to understand. Yes. Maybe to also read like japas, to give that articulation to your developing child. Vamadeva was born with knowledge of all the Vedas. All the Vedas he heard already in the womb. So he was already educated there. So there are instances of prenatal education in a way. So you can start also before you even conceive the child. You have to invoke the being. You have to do certain, as it is beautifully described in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, how the even conception is done in this way, that you invoke the higher being, the higher consciousness. You make a plan, a vision. Take it seriously. Don't do some kind of child that has to be educated. No, the child is not the child. The child is the already ancient being who is coming here. It needs the tools, needs the language, needs your support. So give that support, give that language. Don't treat your child as a child. Treat as an adult who needs the luminous language for its development. That is my answer.
And your closing remarks, I think a lot
closing remark.
I think a lot of food for thought, that it's not just prenatal, but even before that. So yes, but your closing remarks, please, and then we are extremely humbled and grateful.
What I can say, you have such a rich heritage, such an incredible literature. Everything in your reach. You can learn the language. It's not so difficult. By the way, we have Sanskrit classes if you want to really learn within 1.5 years the whole grammar. And grammar is the key. It is this Aindram, yes, which we have to learn how Indra managed Brahaspati's word. So once you know how to do it, the rest is in your hands. So you can read the texts, figure out by yourself what it means. You don't need to rely only on interpretation. The texts are already charged with knowledge. Vedic language, the Veda itself is charged with knowledge. So the language itself is the carrier of knowledge. This is difficult to believe. It's not the guru. You don't need the guru for the Veda. You need the guru for the Veda only how to pronounce. But how to interpret, it has to reappear within you, of course, with the keys of Sri Aurobindo and so on. And there is some guidance needed. But the hymns are always opening a new vision, every time new, fresh, vaster vision. So Veda itself is the guru. Yeah? So in that sense, of course, I would recommend everybody to study Sanskrit deeply as the language of psyche of Indian continent. And as Mother says, India is the psychic being on earth. And earth is the psychic being in the universe. Psychic being means the soul, by which and around which everything evolves and develops. And India is still to find its true being and and offer it to the world to transform the world. And Sri Aurobindo says, even if the world would not go in the direction of transformation and development, India herself alone can do the work. So you have all the material needed for this.
Thank you very much for that very poignant reminder. Mrigendraji, is there something you would like to just say as the moderator to close the session? And then I'd like to invite Vladimirji to please do the Shanti mantra for us together.
Thank you, Anuradhaji, for letting me ask the question. First, I thank everybody. It was a very interactive participation and very enriching. And I like Vladimir ji to reflect on this. Like he mentioned, Indo-European and Indo-Aryan versus the Dravidian languages, they might have had a common origin. In that regard, I like to play a small sound clip and ask his reflection, because this is with sound and word, how they intermixed to create a sense within our body. This is about 16,000 poems were written, of which about 1,600 were discovered. And I am playing part of it, maybe 30 seconds, and how the sounds are combined with words to create an atmosphere within us. So I like your reflections, Vladimir ji's reflection and Anuradha ji's reflection on that. Let me play that sound.
Murugeshanji, we can't make out much. Murugeshanji, the sound has not been very clear. Murugeshanji, the sound is not clear, Murugeshanji.
Okay. I understand the sound is not clear. I will.
Yes, if you could kindly share it with Vladimirji and he'll reply to
I will send it privately. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Your time.
Thank you. And I wanted to say something important, and that we are in the US now building the Sri Aurobindo Integral Life Center, which is a big project. Yeah? We have with us H.P. Rama. He's here. I can see him, and he is the head of this project. He purchased the land of 300 acres, and that's from this place I'm speaking. And we are building the whole facilities for people to come and study. And we are connected to Auro University in Surat, which is again Sri Aurobindo's university. So we are bridging East and West. This bridge between East and West is something which was lost over time. In the Vedas, that was together. The material and the spiritual were going together. The material manifestation was the enterprise of the spirit. But then, as Sri Aurobindo says, they separated. So West went for the physical manifestation, material, and East went for Advaita, for only the spirit, and forgetting the nature. But now they have to come back together. And this togetherness of the material and spiritual is the desideratum for the world today. So we are building the bridge between the most Western US and India. So we want to bring the best knowledge of both into one and examine it from the highest point of view. This is the very important message which I wanted to make. And since HP is there, I'm very happy that he is here with us. HP Rama, who is the founder of our university and the head of this project here. So that is very important for us. And you are most welcome to contribute, to join our projects, our seminars. We have many webinars online. You can find it. I can send to everyone the link, which is called lagrasscenter.com. You can even type lagrasscenter, one word.com, and find all our programs, new perspectives, new approaches to knowledge from the point of view, even from the ancient point of view, how we can utilize the ancient knowledge for the future. That's a good message to end.
Yes, so thank you again. Mrigendraji, is there would you like to just say a quick word, and then we'll request Vladimirji to kindly end the session with a Shanti mantra.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, I was just thinking that how much hard work is there behind the made of this Vladimirji. He might have worked very, very hard to learn these all things, a totally alien language for him, coming from Russia to India, and learned so many things. So hats off to you, sir. It's a great pleasure to be here. And as a participant, I learned a lot of things, a huge respect for you. And it was only possible because of Anuradha ma'am and Nanve sir. And we are very thankful to you both. I just want to say a small mantra. It says that Utthane Amritam Labdam Uthanena Surahata Uthanena Mahendrena Sreshthayam Praptam Divyahacha. So the meaning is, only due to their efforts were gods able to acquire Amrita and kill demons. Only due to his efforts was Indra able to gain superiority in heaven and on earth. So I don't know how much effort you had made in your at your time when you were studying these all things. Definitely, it was. We should appreciate that. Thank you very much for this very great session, sir. We are really very, very thankful to you. Thank you very much.
Mahoday, over to you for a last Shanti mantra.
Om Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om.